Hello and welcome. It's mid-morning in the week before Easter, and today I'm taking a walk around the fields, lanes and woodland to the east of Leeds. It's a murky old spring morning. As I travelled to the start of the walk, there was low cloud and mist hanging over the fields and vales, and just as I took my first few steps, the rain that I think may have set in for a couple of hours began. The walk today starts by the Crooked Billet. It's on the road from Garforth to Towton. In the field opposite the pub is an old chapel, the Lead Chapel. A settlement at Lead was first mentioned in the Domesday Book back in the 1000s, and all that remains of the settlement now is the chapel. I think the field that it's set in would have had timber houses, but they've long gone. Just the bumps and hollows, presumably where buildings once were. Apart from the rain, it's a gorgeous morning. The blackthorn is still flowering and some of the hawthorn is just coming into flower. There are fields planted with rapeseed that is grown for its oil and is already flowering and starting to mature. And there are other fields around that have been left fallow where another crop of rapeseed from last year seems to be coming through. The Vale of York is about 5 miles to the west, and this is just the start of the low Pennine foothills. The hills that here are low and rolling slowly get higher the further west you travel. After crossing the field with the church sitting atmospherically at the centre, we join a lane that gradually climbs uphill. This, if you continue travelling north, would take you straight through to the Hazelwood Castle, but I've turned off and I'm heading west now along the course of the Cockbeck, or River Cock as it's sometimes known. This small river starts actually in the Leeds city area and flows east for maybe 10 miles before it joins the River Wharfe just south of Tadcaster. It has some notoriety as the river that ran red with blood following the Battle of Towton. The battlefield is on some higher ground about 2 miles to the west of this location. If memory serves me correctly, it was in the War of the Roses that the battle was fought and is renowned to be the bloodiest battle fought on, I guess, English soil. There were tens of thousands of people killed on the day in the most brutal fashion you could imagine. Hard to imagine on a peaceful day like today. Along the flat valley floor is a line of trees, not yet in leaf, but covered in lichen, every branch dripping with bright yellow lichen. To my right is a field, and the hill gently climbs up to some woodland. In the distance and to the right is Hayton Wood, which I think I'll walk through. Just seen a hare in the field to my right, not sure what it was doing, running backwards and forwards and then disappeared into the distance. Often see red kites and buzzards when walking round here, and I have been lucky enough just last year to see an otter. I felt so privileged as the creature, I don't think, had heard me, as it had its head under water, just its tail and back legs were sticking up, and it must have stayed like that for 2 or 3 minutes, just flowing with the current, looking for food. I froze because I wanted to get my phone out to take a photograph, get my binoculars out to have a closer look at it, but in the end I just stood perfectly still and enjoyed the moment. It disappeared upstream. I've turned away from the river now and up the gently sloping valley sides to a point where I can enter Hayton Wood, a plantation. It's a beautiful spot this. I often stop for have my lunch here, and it's no less beautiful in the rain. Trees along the top of both ridges. The whole landscape has a misty quality. The trees still dark brown mostly, not fully in leaf yet. A field in the distance, bright yellow from the rapeseed, but very calming. A lovely day. This wood's lovely. It's not very mature. I think it must be a commercial woodland. Walking uphill along the track, there are bluebells, wild primroses, and the little creamy white flowers in profusion of the wood anemone. Spring really has arrived. There are primroses all along the side of the path, bluebells in the woodland, and occasionally among the primroses the tiny little purple flower of the common dog violet, with its small flowers hanging like bells very close to the ground. I'll just stop walking for a moment. If you can imagine, even though we're at low level, we're shrouded in low cloud, the rain steadily falling. In places the leaves are just starting to burst through on trees in the wood, and they look like, well, to my wild imagination, distant galaxies drifting off deep into space. One huge cluster of tiny green shoots, followed by another and another, going further and further back, almost to infinity in the mist. I've left the wood now and I'm walking on a good track that serves the farms in the locality. I'm going to turn right shortly, go through the hedgerow. This area has quite a lot of horse racing stables. It's not really something I know much about, but through the hedgerow I come out onto some gallops with the little white plastic fencing that runs around race courses, a racetrack. I've never yet seen any horses galloping round it. And in the middle of that is a small copse, a small wooded area. And it's one of the few areas on this whole walk that has very mature trees. In the distance, just coming into view, is Hazelwood Castle. Crossing the field inside the racetrack and dropping down, Hazelwood Castle comes fully into view, and it looks very nice on a day like today, shrouded in mist, set as it is in parkland. I'm not sure of its exact history. It was originally a stately home. I believe Mary Queen of Scots stayed there overnight on her travels. I think later it passed into private hands and for a long time was a religious retreat. In more recent times it's become a swanky hotel. There are two lovely horses now in the field that I have to go through. Big horses, both looking at me. Don't know if I've mentioned it before, but I'm a city lad. They are lovely though, but I do hope they move before I have to walk through the field. Well, so far so good. I didn't think they were going to move away from the style, but they did. I'm not sure if "shoo, please go away" is a proper horse term, but they seem to understand. I've left the fields now and I'm back on a well-made track. This whole area between Aberford and Saxton and Stutton near Tadcaster is crisscrossed by farm tracks linking up the various small communities. I don't know if it's unusual so close to a city, but there are mile upon mile of of unmade roads around here, and it's always fairly peaceful to walk. Just by the side of the track is an old summer house, about 2 stories high, built like a round small castle that I guess would have been used when this was a home and the land all around private. It's a lovely feature, but has fallen into disrepair and now sitting as it is by a busy farm track surrounded by farm buildings. No one seems to have a good use for it. I can now see the A64. That's the main leads to Scarborough Road. I'm still on high ground, but to my right now I can see the Vale of York just beginning. I remember from a school geography lesson that although the A64 crosses the Vale of York, as it does so it's higher than the surrounding land. This I remember being told was due to the fact that it had been built on a moraine at the end of a glacier that ended here in the last ice age. Hard to imagine really, looking at this green rain-soaked afternoon, that it would have once been like Antarctica. All along these tracks are farms every few miles, most of them as ancient as Hazelwood Castle. I've skirted the edge of Hazelwood Castle and I'm now heading back into woodland. Another plantation, this one's called Hazelwood, again mostly deciduous trees. The woods are very still, peaceful today. To my right is a large area that's recently been cleared and hundreds if not thousands of new young trees have been planted. I'm reaching the end of Hazelwood. There's a farm on the right just beyond the boundary. It's absolutely delightful, this last section. There are wood anemones and there are literally thousands of them, 20-30 yards wide on either side of the path, and I think it stopped raining. The droplets are dripping from the trees onto the woodland floor, splashing on the delicate leaves and flowers. They're a creamy white bell-shaped flower with just a hint of pink where the flower meets the stem. I've left the wood now and I'm walking down a pleasant lane with a hedge at one side and mature trees and open fields with electricity pylons running through on the right. In the distance, going up from the valley bottom near Aberford towards Hookmore and Micklefield, I can see the 8 lanes of the A1M in the mist and murk. It looks quite ominous. The lights on vehicles moving at seemingly a snail's pace, yet they'll be hurtling along in the rain at 60, 70, 80 miles an hour. It looks quite eerie, like some far off monster slowly working its way across the north of England. Ahead, just where there's a fork in the track, there's a kestrel hovering about 20 feet above the footpath. Beautiful birds when you see them up close. I'm now walking at the side of the motorway. There's a steep banking leading down to it, and at the opposite side a steep banking going up to the village of Aberford. The village is cut off from this countryside, other than by a couple of footbridges and a couple of access tunnels. It is a nice village though, still got lots of pretty little cottages along what was the main road. Hard to imagine all the traffic going north to south, passing through it. Even here though, wildlife is making its presence felt. The banking is covered in bright yellow cowslips. The trumpet-like flowers, quite majestic against the violent, noisy backdrop. The whole of this area that I've been walking in today is crisscrossed by ancient earthworks. I'm just coming up to one of them now. At the lowest point I reach by the motorway, so therefore the noisiest. There is though an information board, so for once my podcast may have some accurate facts. I'm standing by Becker Banks, the longest of three large banks and ditches known as the Aberford Dykes. The other two are South Dyke and Woodhouse Moor Rain. They run across a north-south limestone ridge, an important prehistoric route, which was later followed by the Castleford to Tadcaster Roman Road, the medieval Great North Road between London and Edinburgh, the former A1 and the present A1M. The dykes were previously thought to have protected the local Iron Age tribe, the Brigantes, against the advance of the Roman Empire in the 1st century AD. Others have suggested they defended the later British kingdom of Elmy against the Anglo-Saxons in the late 6th and early 7th century, or protected the Anglo-Saxon kingdom of Deira against the Mercians. Archaeological excavations have confirmed Becker Banks and South Dyke are 2,500 years old, dating to the late Iron Age, around 400 BC to AD 70. Becker Banks runs east to west for 5.5 kilometres from Potterton Bridge in the west to Hayton Wood in the east. The bank was built above the north side of the beck with a ditch on the downslope. By using the natural slope, the earthwork would originally have been almost 9 metres high from the bottom of the ditch to the top of the bank. South Dyke lies on the south side of Cockbeck to the east of the A1M and is only 1 kilometre long. The ditch is on the upslope north side of the bank, and the west end runs down towards a possible crossing point of the beck. In the best preserved parts, the bank stands up to 3 metres high and the ditch 10 metres wide. Woodhouse Moor Rain is almost 2 kilometres long, and in places the bank is 5 metres high and up to 16 metres wide. The exact date and function of this substantial earthwork remains obscure. Walking away from the motorway towards the east, Becker Banks is to my right. I'm actually on top of the earthwork with the banking dropping sharply down to the ditch. To the west, the whole area has been destroyed by the motorway. Going in this direction, the bank goes all the way into Hayton Wood, where it's actually very clear that there is an earthwork there. I've now turned off and I'm heading on a service road, still following the course of the motorway. I go past the water treatment plant for Aberford, uphill, and then head back inland towards my starting point. Even in recent times, Aberford had 3 pubs, which were all coaching inns in earlier times. The mail coach and stage coaches travelling on the long journey north and south would stop. They had stables and accommodation. 2 of them are now closed, being sold I think for private houses, and there's just 1 pub left in the village. As teenagers, or in our early 20s, we got into the habit of coming out here on a Friday night. I'm not sure who we thought we were. There were plenty of pubs in the city that we went in, but we used to like our bus ride. I think it was just the fact that a bus came to the very edge of Leeds, out into the countryside. So we'd finish work on a Friday, come here, drink copious amounts of beer, have fish and chips, and go home on the bus. I've left the service road now. I'm heading back inland towards the Crooked Billet. Behind me is the motorway, and at the other side of it, Aberford. I followed the road for about 1.5 miles, and my ears are throbbing from the noise. Ahead of me, going roughly north to south, Woodhouse Moor Rain. The whole thing's now filled with hedge plants and trees, but the closer you get, the clearer it becomes. From my side, there's a straight drop down into a ditch, and then on the other side, a steep banking leading up to a raised earthwork. Standing where I'm stood, human beings have been busy living their lives thousands upon thousands of years. I always imagined there would have been wooden fencing running along the top, and inside, presumably, communities, farms, animals, just negotiating the banking. It's a little bit it's a little bit treacherous after all the rain of the last few hours. And out the other side, the view opens up once again, looking across to Hazelwood in the far distance, Hayton Wood in the near distance. I'm at the point now where I pick up my path that I followed out this morning. I'm at the crossing point of the beck. The water's quite fast flowing with all the rain, but lovely and clear. I've never found anywhere deep enough to swim yet. I imagine there's a little pool somewhere along here. There's a red kite just overhead. Not often I come on this walk and don't see one. They're quite common now, and I believe we're either extinct or almost extinct in the UK not so many years ago. Has to be one of the most successful reintroductions of a bird. The otters are doing well though, because growing up as a child they were very rare, or they seemed to be. A lot of the rivers were very badly polluted, and I read somewhere that there aren't many rivers in Yorkshire now that don't have otters in them, which is wonderful because they are such a beautiful creature. This little river, or beck, has had a lot of work done to it. I believe the Environment Agency did work to improve its flow and put weirs in, and I believe there are salmon now coming to lay their eggs in it, which maybe explains why I saw an otter in it. I've been lucky. That was the sighting last summer was the third time I've seen otters. The first time was at a campsite at Ullapool about 25 years ago, and to this day I swear it came up out of the water, took an oyster catcher, took it underwater, came back up and sat on a rock eating it. The second time was a wonderful experience. I was walking with one of my sons on the Kyle of Durness in the very north of Scotland, and he went all David Attenborough on me and laid down in the path, and I followed suit, and the cliff there is only a few metres, 3 or 4 metres down to the beach, and it's a vast expanse of sand is the Kyle of Durness when the tide goes out. And there was an otter and a young otter, and we watched it for about 20 minutes, and basically the mother or the father had caught a fish that was still alive, and they came up the shoreline amongst the rocks, let go of the fish, which then tried wriggling back to sea, and the little otter was having loads of fun chasing it, catching it. I guess it was teaching it how to hunt, and this went on for about 10 minutes, and the poor fish had no chance until eventually, we'll say, the mother went to the water's edge, got the fish, came back up on the shore and bit into its head, and we were so close we actually heard the crunch. It was fabulous. And then the two creatures sat there, ate the fish, and then we watched them walking off across the sand, disappearing into the distance. But they've all been great sightings that I'll remember all my life. Not least the one last year, because I never really expected to see one a mile or so from the Leeds boundary. I'm almost back at the start of my walk, back in the field where the Lead Chapel is, the Crooked Billet pub in the distance. I forgot to mention earlier, it's well known for its giant Yorkshire puddings, has been for many years. I think there's been a pub there for hundreds and hundreds of years, but you can get Yorkshire puddings for every course, starter, main and dessert. I'm just coming up to the chapel, which is now owned by the Redundant Churches Trust. I think for a lot of years it was derelict and then was restored. It's no longer used as a church, apart from once a year when they have an annual service, but it's open to the public, and it's a lovely spot to sit outside in summer or to sit inside on a cold winter's day. Place to pause and reflect on the day's walk, the day's exertions, and what tomorrow might bring. There's often sheep in the field surrounding it, so there's a little gate protecting the door, which is ancient and weathered. First documentary evidence of the church was in 1421, and that it was a church for a little estate, and by 1596 it was in complete ruin. In the 18th century it was restored, and the 3-deck pulpit that it now has in the left-hand corner was installed. It's very simple, with just a half a dozen rows of pews, the 3-deck pulpit and a stone altar. The roof is made of wood, and there are various coats of arms and inscriptions on the walls. The door's interesting. It has various writing on the back of it. Rededicated by the Bishop of Whitby in 1932. This chapel was repaired in 1784. Built about 1150 AD. With streaks of light coming through the gaps in the panels. I do love sitting in old churches where people have sat before me for almost 1,000 years. The pews are beautiful, though. I'm guessing they'll be oak, but they're damaged, and you can see the marks of the tools where bits of wood have broken off. They show their age. I'll say cheerio.